Congress hears the warning about lab payment cuts. Patient health could be on the line. And the premier event all pathologists should attend this spring. Coming up next. This is the Path News Network Daily Edition, powered by the College of American Pathologists. Today is Tuesday, January 13th. I'm Brittany Riddle. Here's the latest news. Payment cuts took center stage on Capitol Hill last week as Congress heard testimony on how the cuts will affect patient care. Lawmakers heard from experts on why passing the Reforming and Enhancing Sustainable Updates to Laboratory Testing Services, or the Results Act, is critical for maintaining clinical laboratory services. Susan Van Meter, president of the American Clinical Laboratory Association, warned lawmakers that the cuts would have a ripple effect on labs nationwide.
Well, I think the impact could be profound for smaller laboratories in particular, but I must say even larger laboratories, whether they be in urban areas or small communities, there can be large laboratories in small communities. It is extraordinarily difficult to have the professional laboratory and staff and the infrastructure, these labs run 24/7, to be able to carry out that service in a timely fashion for $7.77. They're committed to doing so. ACLA members are committed to doing so, but we worry profoundly about the impact of those reductions.
Later in the show, I'll be joined by Dr. Mary Lay to discuss the CAP's advocacy efforts to get the Results Act passed. CAP members can also use our Action Alert Center to urge Congress to pass the Results Act. Pathologists will have their opportunity to champion these issues and more on Capitol Hill this spring at the 2026 House of Delegates and Pathologist Leadership Summit. Pathologists from around the country will gather in the nation's capital April 25th through 28th for the CAP's premier advocacy and networking event. Visit cap.org for more details and to register today. Are you a pathologist looking to influence the future of medical diagnosis? The National Academy of Medicine has an opportunity with you in mind. Apply now to the NAM Scholars in Diagnostic Excellence program and be a part of a new wave of leaders. Check the link in the show notes for application details. Finally, as we closely watch the Results Act progress on Capitol Hill, I'm joined by Dr. Mary Lay, chair of the CAP's Federal and State Affairs Committee, to discuss what this could mean for pathologists. Dr. Lay, thank you so much for joining us today. So let's do a little background. So can you tell our listeners, what is the Results Act?
The Reforming and Enhancing Sustainable Updates to Laboratory Testing Services, the Results Act, is legislation to reform a prior bill, the Protecting Access to Medicare, PAMA Act. And this was enacted in 2014 to modernize the clinical laboratory fee schedule. Now, the intention of PAMA was to establish a single market-based national fee schedule informed by private payer data. The implementation has fallen short, and that places patient access to diagnostic services at risk. And let me explain further that the initial data collection that was conducted in 2017 had serious flaws in its methodology. The process significantly underrepresented hospital outreach and physician office laboratories. These are responsible for delivering many of the most commonly ordered tests for Medicare beneficiaries. As a result, the data failed to reflect a true market-based rate, and that triggered nearly $4 billion in reductions to laboratory reimbursements. Now, since then, Congress has recognized the shortcomings. They've enacted bipartisan patches and delays to postpone additional reimbursement cuts. However, right now we are facing a cut of up to 15% in laboratory fee services at the end of January if something is not done.
You know, you talked about the cuts could be up to 15%, and these are common tests for Medicare beneficiaries. Can you talk about what that would mean for patients like a Miss Mary who lives in a certain city who receives Medicare? What would that mean for her?
Yeah, basically, we are talking about 800 of the most commonly ordered tests for patients that come in. And what happens is if the test is not reimbursed appropriately, smaller labs will not have the capacity to serve patients, especially in rural areas. The likely result would be consolidation of testing. And so the sample, if a patient comes in at a rural hospital, the sample might get shipped out to a larger facility that has the capacity to run these tests. And that just delays the results. And if you're in an emergency room and you need to know if your electrolytes are imbalanced because your treatment depends on that, and it gets delayed, it may be delayed overnight or the next day. That has direct patient impact, and it's a disservice to our patients. And the most vulnerable are those who are going to be in underserved and rural areas.
Thank you for that. And you also mentioned, this would be a disservice to patients, to pathologists, and could create a delay in diagnosis. Can you talk a little bit about what the CAP has done to advocate for the Results Act?
Well, last year on our Hill Day, April of last year, we did discuss reforming the PAMA. And some of our listeners might remember a prior bill. It was called SALSA, Saving Access to Laboratory Services Act, would do basically the same thing. It had bipartisan support. The drawback was that it was deemed to be very costly. About $6 billion over 10 years. And Congress did not have an appetite at that time. And so what they've been doing, and which is what we're in now, is a cheaper, not as costly patch. We're in a patch right now. However, that will end January 30th. And currently, we did have a hearing with Energy and Commerce. We did have a hearing where we discussed the salient points, and we'll have to wait and see. We're waiting and seeing what the next step is. We have until January 30th.
Yes, and while we're anxiously awaiting to see what happens, what can pathologists do now to urge Congress to pass the Results Act before the end of January?
We did put out an email with PathNet and Path Advocacy email. If you haven't seen it, please let us know, because we have emailed every member who has agreed to receive communications from the CAP. And there is a link where you can directly connect with your congressperson to say that we need you to support the Results Act. Put in your name, the zip code in where you vote, so your zip code where you are a constituent, and it automatically generates the Senate and representatives that serve your area. We have a letter that's already pre-filled out, and you can just email it as it is, or what's even better is if you can add your own stories, and there's a place where you can edit the letter, and you just hit send. It's very simple.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Lay, for joining me today. We'll be sure to put in all the resources that you mentioned in today's show notes, and as we anxiously await for some good news around the Results Act. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's all for today on the Path News Network Daily Edition. Find more on today's stories in the show notes and the CAP's member newsletters on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're back tomorrow at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a great day.